We're going to start with the easy symbols first, the elevations, sections, and details. But something to know before we get into the symbols themselves is that you're going to find multiple drawings on a single page when it comes to these three elements. So when you go to a page with elevations, you'll find multiple elevations, and they're going to be numbered 1 through however many there are. If you have another page of elevations, they will also be numbered 1 through however many there are. So let's say you have 8 elevations on 2 different pages. On the first page, 4 elevations numbered 1 through 4. On the second page, 4 elevations numbered 1 through 4. That's the way the drawings work. And that's going to mean something as we go through the symbols. So let's look at elevations first. Now, this is the most common symbol for elevations, which is a circle and an arrow. In the circle, the top number is the number of the drawing to look at. So what we just talked about, multiple elevations on a single page. For this, we would be looking at elevation 1. If we wanted to look at the second elevation on that page, we would look at 2. The number would be 2 at the top. On the bottom is the page number that we have to look at. That's what makes it so easy. When we see a symbol like that, we know what drawing to look at and what page to look at. And then finally on the elevation, the arrow. The arrow is pointing at the elevation. So we talked about this before, how when you're looking at an elevation on a plan, it's as if you're standing there looking at the elevation. Well, now with this symbol, it's as if you're standing in the center of the symbol, looking in the direction that the symbol points, and it's pointing at that elevation. So you're going to look for a drawing on a certain page based on the information in the symbol. And that arrow can point in any direction. Let's say you're inside the building. So you could point at one wall or the other wall. It just depends on which wall you want the elevation for. You can modify the symbol to point at all the walls if you want. Here's an example of a symbol for an elevation that points at all the walls. And notice how the elevation number is included in the periphery of the symbol, and the page you can find the elevation on is in the center. And here's another example of an elevation symbol. This one is not as clear, but is a good example of what you might find on drawings. So you got to be flexible in what your expectations are when you look at different drawings. All right, so let's see an example of this elevation. If we look on our drawing A0.1, there's a little plan off to the upper right-hand corner. And if we zoom in on that plan, we can see that there's an elevation symbol off to the left, and it points off to the right. It points at one of the walls. So I can expect to see an elevation of that wall. And when we look at the details of that elevation, on the top it gives us an elevation number, and on the bottom it gives us the page we can find it on. What's really interesting about this one is that the page it says we can find it on happens to be the page that we are on. So we don't even have to flip pages. We just look on the same page and we're going to find our elevation. And here it is. Section lines are very similar to elevations. If you take the elevation symbol, draw a line from it, and put a tail on it, you got a section line. It works exactly like an elevation symbol in that it's going to tell you what drawing to look at and tell you what page the drawing will be found on. Well, this symbol is going to appear on the drawing with the line showing you where that cut is. The arrow shows your orientation, which way you're facing. Very important when you're looking at sections that you know to look in a certain direction. Otherwise, you're going to have the mirror image of what you expect. You're going to have a lot of different section symbols depending on the type of section. A really long section may have the section symbol on both sides with a line connecting them to show you where the section is. Sometimes that line would be obtrusive to other parts of the drawing, so they just stop the line and they don't put a tail. So if you don't see a tail on a section line, that section is probably continuing to someplace else, and you should find where it's continuing to. The tail on a section is just to let you know where the section stops. Let's say you just want a section of a particular wall. You'd put the symbol on one side of the wall, you'd put the tail on the other side and the line connecting them. So you know to expect only that little bit of area in the section itself. Now, if you end up with a section that doesn't have an arrow, and I've seen them, it would be left for you to interpret which direction that section is in, and normally it's not too difficult once you get used to looking at drawings. So let's look at some examples of section lines. So we're back to A 1.0. I want you to look over on the right-hand side. Over here in this area, you're going to find an example of a section that goes through the entire building. Now notice how the section symbols are on both ends of that section because it's extremely long. And also notice how the arrows for that section are pointing in a certain direction. You know when you see that section, you'll be looking in that direction. We can follow the information in the section symbol, the section number and the page number, to actually see that section on that particular page. Now if we move over just a little bit, we see another section symbol. It seems odd that we have two section symbols so close together. But in this case, it's slightly different than the first one. In this case, we have a tail. And that tail indicates that the limit of our section is just inside the wall, outside the wall. But like the other symbol, we have a number and a page to look at, and we go to that number and page, and we can find that particular section. Now finally, details. Details don't have arrows. It doesn't have an orientation. You're not looking at a particular thing. You want to focus in on an area. So details have a line extending from them and then a dashed line circling the area that you want to get a detail of. But like elevations and sections, you know what drawing to look at and what page to look at because it's in the symbol itself. So let's look at an example of a detail. We're going to go back to a section that we actually looked at on page A5.0. Off to the left of this section is an area that when we zoom in shows a dashed line around an area with a symbol. If we follow that to the drawing number and the page that that symbol indicates, then we're going to find the detail for that symbol. And that detail gives us even more information. If we look at the detail a little bit closer, we find there is another detail symbol on the detail, right? The symbol with the dashed line. If we follow, again, the number and the page number, we find that detail, and we have more information. So this is a great example of how we can go from a plan to a section to a detail to another detail to get just the information we need. It wouldn't have occurred to us to go right to this detail. There's just no way to do it. You have to go through these progressive steps to get the information you need. So when you start reading plans, don't get frustrated that you have to go through these steps. It's just part of the process.